I'm Christian Zip, and I'm lucky enough to be one of the hosts of the NorthWestFest Q&A with directors. And joining us today is Colin Scheyen, director, producer, cinematographer of the film Love, Oran. It's playing as part of NorthWestFest from Thursday, May 6th till Sunday, May 16th. And it's one of the films in the Made in Canada program presented by Canadian Cinema Editors. You can stream it, as with all other films part of this festival, at northwestfest.ca. Colin, welcome. And we want to talk, obviously, about your film without giving too much away. And hopefully people are going to want to be able to check this out because it's a fantastic little film. Love, Oran revolves around a secret letter hidden in a wall for 70 years. So let's let the audience know about what unfolds in this film around that letter.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I'm just so over the moon that this film is premiering at NorthWestFest. When I lived in Edmonton for many years, it was NorthWestFest that was a lot of ways my first exposure to documentary film. So the fact that now my first feature film is actually going to be premiering here is just, it's full circle. It's just such an incredible honor and experience for me. And it also makes sense because this film is a kind of remarkable autobiographical piece, although I'm not ever in the film. There's a lot of strange and bizarre connections that drew me to tell this story. The first of all, the film opens with a house, and it's a lovely Victorian home in Red Deer, Alberta. And that's actually the home that I grew up in. And when I think about home and where I come from, that's the one place on this earth that I think about. And so it's very fitting that 70 years before that, there was a woman named Oran who also grew up in this house. And so although I never had the opportunity to meet Oran or get to know her, we kind of share this connection of growing up in the same house in completely different decades. And so learning about her story and her family story, it was just such an honor. Really one of the best things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk a little bit about your own personal connection, even though you're not featured necessarily in the film. It does kind of lead to this idea of when those letters get discovered in the basement, when you're looking at possibly remodeling it. There's one person in particular that really gets connected to them, and that's Naomi that's in the film. And I'll let you kind of give some context about it. But the fascination that Naomi had with these letters went so much far deeper than this kind of antiquity or the mystery of these letters. So talk to us a little bit about why Naomi felt drawn to them and how that eventually leads us to Peggy Ashton, or I guess Peggy Ann Donna, who is the sister.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, first of all, Naomi is my sister-in-law. So my brother married her, and they decided to buy that house and settle in there. And she is a wonderful, loving, caring mother, as all mothers are. And read this story of this one individual, Oran, who 70 years ago was in a situation where she wasn't given that right to be a mother, which is kind of we treat it as though it's a piece of Canadian past where young mothers, there was a stigma of being unmarried and pregnant, and unfortunately a lot of mothers throughout Canada and around the world were denied that purely for the sake that they were not married. And unfortunately, because of that stigma, Oran gave that child up for adoption. And I think that story in itself, aside from all the other incredible things that happen in this story, that starting piece really had a profound impact on Naomi as a mother. She could really empathize with those letters and understand the pain of losing something like that, and how although it's something we talk about as history and something we don't talk about far enough. That legacy lived on for the rest of Oran's life. Oran died in the late 90s, and she took that secret with her to her grave. No one knew about that, and I think that's a common story for a lot of mothers throughout Canada in that experience. So I think having that empathy for that situation, and knowing that the profound depth of a mother's love is not something that you can just sign away. It's always there. And Oran always loved Donna till the day she passed. And I think that's really is, if I think about what I think is the most beautiful part of this story, a lot of people treat love in film like it's a metaphor, and they have all these different elaborate ways to measure what it means to be loved. But this doesn't even need to be a metaphor. It's a secret letters hidden in a basement, hidden away from the rest of the world for 70 years. And the impact of that was just started by a mother's love. So there's no metaphor needed, although it's a perfect metaphor to describe the depth of that. 70 years later, a mother's love is still felt even long after she's gone. It's pretty beautiful, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it in that answer before, and in talking about this idea that Oren clearly isn't the only one that's had to endure this kind of level of judgment or stigma of having a child at that young of age, and just that parallel from an incident that happened decades later for Naomi. That's something that I think deeply touches not only the women in this film, but probably people that watch it. So, how do you hope this
Yeah.
story could still be, relevant, or how were you hoping that it would be to women that watch this film today, or people that, can identify with that story?
Well, I think this year in particular, the importance of family and those connections that we have to our loved ones that can't necessarily be with us, those that have passed this year, those that we can't see on a day-to-day basis. I think really going through this experience, I edited most of this film during the pandemic, and it was therapy for me because I missed, I wasn't able to see so many of the people that I love, and really exploring what unconditional love means is that's really at the heart of what I wanted to do in this story. So that's a story that resonates no matter where you're from or who you are, when you were born. Um, that's something that's important to all of us, and to feel unconditional love from someone who's no longer with us, but gave us this beautiful letter. That just to me is just such an honor and such a it's just something that I think is so important that we need to remember that love really is the driving force, the power of this universe, and even after we've gone, our love still stays with us in mysterious ways. It still lingers and impacts people all these decades later.
And I think that's the true power of this film, right? You know, the concept of these letters, these personal letters that are left unread and hidden for decades, is such a deep contrast to how we communicate now, right? And what makes this
Yeah.
film work is that the history kind of unfolds from those pages and just the weight that it carries for the people that discover them. So, I mean, what do you think these letters from Orm to her father, what is it about them that kind of carries that weight, even though they're just, they were personal between two people?
hmm Well, I had the opportunity to read many of Oren and her father's letters. The family, gave me access to reading those, and this was a family that really loved writing. They loved literature. They read Shakespeare all the time together. They loved language, and so Oren, I think, really. Uh, she got that love from her father for a love of language, and she articulates the pain and sorrow in this innocence in a truthful way. We tend to in our everyday language, hide behind emotion through irony and things like that. But there's none of that in these letters. It's a very difficult time in a young woman's life when she was carrying the weight of the world and was dealing with an issue that was beyond her control and was dealing with a profound negative stigma of being pregnant and out of wedlock, which again was beyond her control. And so she's also speaking with her father in a tenderly loving way. And unfortunately, we don't actually know how, we never saw the letters that Oran's father responded by, but you can tell that there's a deep concern. Oran's mother died when she was very young, so really her only parental connection that she had was with her father, and they had a really loving and tender relationship. And I think she felt like she could be honest with him, but she also felt probably a lot of shame, unfortunately. And it's good that we now live in a time where that shame isn't there, but we can all relate to that because we all have difficult times, and we all carry things that we don't talk about in open, but we share with those people that are really close to us. And I think these letters give us a glimpse into that world.
Yeah, and even though Oren isn't able to be in this film specifically, her spirit hangs over the whole thing. It's in the letters. It's in the people you meet. How did you kind of find a way to get around that? Because you were never going to have that opportunity to really be able to talk to this woman and reflect upon her life. You kind of had to do it in so many different ways to be able to have, her feelings, her thoughts, and represent her as much as possible in this film, even though because she's passed, there was no way to actually contact her and get her in the film.
Yeah.
How did you get around that?
Well, to me, it starts from how I saw this story, and to me, this is a ghost story. It's the difference, of course, is it's not a ghost story in the sense of a horror film, or it's not a thriller. It's a ghost story of love, and so I wanted to treat it like that. I wanted to bring Oran alive, and fortunately, there was some film of her that existed, and so we were able to use that. Only small amounts, really, because that's all that existed. But she also blessed us with some really generous letters that she wrote, and so we were able to bring those alive. And I also learned that Oran loved photography, and so we got access to all of her photos that she took of her children that she raised after the child was given up for adoption, and she really, you can see the love that she had for her children in those letters. So it wasn't much of a task to bring her to life because there is still so much of her that still exists to this day. And I think that just comes from being an open heart, just somebody who put other people ahead of herself, and those kind of things stay with us for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, you've said previously, and even in this interview, that you made this film, Love Oran, in order to create a sense of hope, and that it could serve as a reminder of how connected we all are and how important family is to our survival. And you absolutely achieved that, Colin. It's a fantastic piece of film. Colin Scheyen has been our guest. He's the director, producer, cinematographer, and editor of Love Oran, probably so much more. That's how it works on a small film, right? An intimate film. It's playing as part of NorthWestFest, obviously, from Thursday, May 6th until Sunday, May 16th. It's one of the films in the Made in Canada series presented by Canadian Cinema Editors. Colin, thanks for your time, and thank you so much for the film.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be a part of the festival, and I hope everyone has a great NorthWestFest